So last spring I found myself on the way to Omaha, Nebraska. I was heading there with Babcock's Media, a company that started off doing automotive trade magazines but has moved heavily into video. The head of the video department is an old friend of mine, Wes, and this is the first time that just the two of us were traveling on one of the gigs together, but I've traveled with Babcock's a number of times. We got into Chicago, and it turns out all the flights heading west were pretty much canceled. Everything out there was storms and thunderstorms, heavy winds. We were trying to figure out what to do. We ended up deciding to just rent a car and make the 7-hour drive all the way to Omaha. We were on a tight schedule with an early morning shoot outside Omaha. We were going to be filming 2 factories that are run by Continental, which is a division of Continental tires. They bought a division of Goodyear, which makes belts and hoses and all that kind of thing. We were there to cover them. My job was mostly going to be to shoot B-roll and to shoot stills. Just about midnight, and we've made it to Omaha. And it's pouring. The drive in the morning was absolutely crazy. The weather was horrible. We could barely see, and the rental car was getting absolutely pounded by hail. It was a little scary, I'll be honest. Actually turned out tornado sirens were going off as there were a number of tornadoes in the area, and we finally ended up getting off the road for a little bit. It also took our contacts a little while to get to the plant as well, so we didn't turn out being too late. And when we got there, the weather ended up clearing up a bit for a while, so we were able to get done what we needed to. When we arrived, we had a meeting, and I said, let's get the drone footage done first while we know the weather is decent. So that's what we did. We headed outside, and I flew the drone. I have a Mavic Pro 2, which is good enough for this kind of work. If you've ever flown a drone, one of the things you're really trying to do is keep everything really steady and make it look cinematic. So I did a number of shots, a number of flyovers, and things like that. After a safety meeting, we were walked through the plant, starting with them making the actual rubber. First time I've actually seen that, surprisingly, being that I'm from the former rubber capital of the world. And a lot of the people we were working with knew Akron because they used to be Goodyear, this plant, even though now it's Continental. I am shooting with a Canon R5, the original, and I'm doing 120 FPS. So basically doing all handheld slow motion, doing the kind of stuff that, I've learned from a lot from like Peter McKinnon, but Babcock's really hires me for my B-roll skills for the most part. And so, yeah, these are all handheld pans. One thing I never hear people talk about in reviews of cameras that much is the electronic stabilization. So here I got the image stabilization from the sensor going on, but then the enhanced electronic stabilization. So I'm using a 16 millimeter to 35 f.2 because when you use the enhanced stabilization, it is cropping in on the full image. I have the camera in a cage, but as mentioned, this is all just handheld, trying to do push and pull and pan shots. I've been on very expensive shoots where it's very different, where we are maybe making 10 shots like this in the entire day, where you're lighting everything and putting a cinema camera onto dollies and all that. This is the opposite. This is moving around the factory and trying to get as much as we can. This footage here is captured with my Pocket 3. My Pocket 3 turned out to be a huge benefit because we had to do interviews, and one of our bags, we didn't get since we drove, and we didn't have our wireless mic set. So I was able to use the Pocket 3 with its wireless mic to get this interview recorded.
In the Norfolk Mix Center, I will talk. Basically, a lot of stuff that we do get raw material in is a returnable container.
Developed that we didn't offer, and between the two of us, we have that up and going, and we...
Another advantage of having the Pocket is they wanted some drone footage inside, but that wasn't going to work with all the wires and everything hanging. I didn't feel comfortable, so I was able to use the Pocket 3 to basically mimic fly-arounds inside the factories. So after that first shoot, we decided we needed to head to the airport to get our bag. We were actually going to be spending the next night in Lincoln, Nebraska, which would be closer to our next shoot. But with the way things went with the weather, we had to go out of our way and back to the airport. Unfortunately, the storms were following us again. You could see there's blue skies here, but there was just a wall of black in certain directions. We managed to get to the airport without problems and then back to Lincoln. When I travel for work, my main focus is getting the job done, but I can't lie, I love to travel and I love to be able to explore. So the first night in Omaha was a bit of a bummer because I thought I was going to be able to go out and have dinner and walk around and explore a city I've never seen. That did not happen because we didn't get in until midnight, as you saw, but at least I did have a little bit of time in Lincoln. So me and Wes got dinner together. He went back to get some work done, and I roamed the streets and took some magic hour photos and hit a couple breweries and had some beers. So I did get a little bit of a chance to check out the town. The next morning, it was off to the other plant. This was going to be the same thing. I was going to be shooting slow motion B-roll and then taking a bunch of stills for them as well. I love working for Babcock's because I'm basically a freelance camera operator for them. So when the job is done, it's done. I don't have any editing to do, and I pass off the footage, in this case to my friend Wes. I actually rode my bike over his house a few days later and we transferred all my footage. Again, we started off with getting the drone footage. This plant was much bigger, as you can see, so it was pretty fun to fly over this. I don't use my drone all that much, so I do love when I get the opportunity to do a little flying and trying to do it as cinematic as possible. As little, like I said, movement, trying to keep everything really smooth. I realized that with my Pocket 3, I need to change the gimbal speed because anytime I tried to move the gimbal, it kind of takes you out of the experience. Anyway, so this is more of the 120 B-roll. Like I said, my R5 in a cage. I actually only shot this in 1080. You're watching this in YouTube in 4K. I just up-res it, but that's a little more what they need for this kind of stuff because it'd be going on the website and social, so it's not worth wasting all the memory of shooting this in 124K, which the files are massive on the Canon R5 with. Another thing when you're doing this kind of work is you need to be able to be communicative with the people, because when this guy was doing something, I know his machine wasn't working quite right for a couple of the runs, and he's like, no, don't show that. So that goes with the job, is being able to talk with some of the people, like what do we want to show, what is the right thing that's going on, making sure people are following OSHA standards and all that kind of stuff. That's up to the people who are giving you the tour, but it's something that's important to remind everybody. I like this little Wes Anderson shot that we did in the office area. This is another thing that you end up doing when you do shoots. It's a lot of Hollywood. So there weren't a lot of people up in this office on this day. So even our contacts from Continental, the social media person, the person who was doing the interviews, everybody sat at the desks and pretended like they were working because that's the shot we needed. Here you can see this is when I was using the DJI Pocket 3 to mimic drone footage. There's a bunch of this, of long passes through the factories. These are just a couple quick clips you can see. So yeah, this is a pretty cool gig. I feel like a lot of this machinery would be the kind of thing you'd watch on TikTok or YouTube Reels of really satisfying, mechanical stuff going on, all the dials. Right when we were leaving our shoot, we got the notification that our flight to Dallas that was going to connect into Cleveland was canceled. So again, it was back to the airport, grabbing a different rental car, and then our contacts back in Akron were able to find us a flight out of Des Moines. So we stopped at this little brewery in Des Moines, and then we headed over to the airport, and we were finally on our way back to Cleveland. So nothing really went as planned on the travel of this trip, but the shoots went really well. That's one of the problems with work travel, with what we're doing. People are waiting for us, they're set up for us, and we need to get the job done somehow. So it's great traveling with Wes because he's one of those guys who's going to figure out a way to get there and get home. And I had to be home because I had a big shoot the next morning. I was actually very tired when I got there, so a bunch of cups of coffee to get myself going. And it was a videography and photography job, but that one was for myself. Anyways, I'm working on a couple videos that will show some of the bigger shoots I've been a part of, where we're using the cinema cameras and the dolly zooms, and like I said, spending all day just to get a handful of shots. Really interesting, really different kind of thing. So if you like this kind of content, give it the thumbs up, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.